This story didn't happen to me. It happened to a friend of mine back in America. We grew up 2 houses apart, and even after I moved overseas, we stayed close. Call every couple of months, that kind of thing. A few weeks ago, he told me everything, start to finish, and asked me to share it, because he said maybe another father out there needs to hear it before it's too late for him too. So, I'm going to tell it the way he told it to me, in his own words. My name doesn't matter. What matters is that I raised my daughter alone from the time she was 6 years old. Her mother left on a Tuesday morning and never came back, and I never once let my little girl see me fall apart about it. I worked 2 jobs. I missed things I shouldn't have missed. But I never missed a single one of her fashion shows in high school, because from the time she could hold a pencil, all she ever drew were dresses. When she told me at 22 that she wanted to start her own clothing label, I didn't hesitate. I took the money I'd been saving for my own retirement, the number doesn't matter, but it was everything I had, and I put it into her company, not as a gift, as an investment. My lawyer drew up the paperwork properly. I held 40% of the company, quietly, structured through a holding entity so it wouldn't look like her dad was propping her up in front of investors. She wanted people to believe in her, not in me. I understood that. I signed away my name from the day-to-day and let her run it exactly the way she wanted. For 3 years, it worked. The label grew from a spare bedroom into a real studio, then into an office in the design district with her name on the glass door. I was proud in a way I don't have words for. I'd stop by maybe once a month, always calling ahead, always staying 20 minutes so I wouldn't be in the way. That was our rhythm. That was respect. Then she brought on a business partner. His name was Trent. Charming, sharp suits, talked fast about scaling and brand positioning, and words I didn't fully understand, but that made my daughter's eyes light up. He came in as a minority partner with an investment of his own, and within 6 months, he was in every meeting, every decision, every room she was in. I told myself I was just an old man being protective. I told myself to trust her judgment. Then came the day I decided to surprise her. It was her birthday, and I'd driven 40 minutes out of my way to bring her favorite coffee and a small gift before her morning meeting started. I didn't call ahead. For the first time in 3 years, I just walked in. The office was quiet except for 2 voices coming from behind her half-closed door. One was Trent's. The other belonged to a lawyer I didn't recognize. I'd learned later his name was Whitfield. I stopped in the hallway, coffee still in my hand, because of the very first word I heard. Liability. That's the word that made me freeze. Not partner, not investor. Liability. And it was being used about me. I stood there and I listened, and I'm not ashamed of that. Because what I heard next was Trent telling this lawyer that the old man's 40% is the only thing standing between me and full control, and that if they could get my daughter to sign a restructuring agreement, one she hadn't seen yet, one buried inside 60 pages of routine-sounding paperwork, my shares would be diluted down to almost nothing within 18 months, quietly, legally, without me ever noticing until it was already done. If you're watching this and you've ever felt your own stomach drop like the floor disappeared under you, you know exactly what that moment felt like. Before we go further, if stories like this hit you about fathers who get underestimated and come back stronger, hit subscribe now, because there's a lot more where this came from. I didn't walk in and start shouting. That's not who I am, and it's not what the moment called for. I set the coffee down on the reception desk, walked back out to my car, and sat there for 20 minutes just breathing. Then I called my lawyer, the same one who'd structured the original investment 3 years earlier, and I asked him one question. Could Trent actually do this? He laughed, not because it was funny, but because he already knew something Trent clearly didn't. See, when I'd structured my 40%, I hadn't just taken a passive stake. Buried in the original operating agreement was a clause my lawyer had insisted on, one my daughter had signed off on without a second thought, back when it was just the 2 of us building something from nothing. Any restructuring of ownership required unanimous written consent from all founding shareholders, not majority vote. I wasn't just a shareholder Trent could outvote. I was a lock on the door. He either didn't know that clause existed, or he was betting my daughter would sign the new agreement without me ever finding out there was anything to consent to. For 2 weeks, I said nothing. I let Trent believe his plan was moving forward exactly on schedule. I watched him get bolder in meetings, watched him start referring to the company as "we're pivoting" instead of "she's pivoting." And quietly, I had my lawyer pull every piece of paperwork Trent had filed since the day he joined the company. That's when we found the second thing, the thing that turned this from a family disagreement into something much bigger. Trent had been quietly siphoning manufacturing contracts to a company his own brother owned, marking up costs by nearly 30%, and pocketing the difference through a consulting fee structure buried in an appendix nobody but him ever read. My daughter's company had been bleeding money for almost a year, and she'd been told it was just the cost of scaling. It wasn't scaling, it was theft, dressed up in a suit. I sat my daughter down myself. Not Trent, not Whitfield the lawyer. Me at her kitchen table, the same table where she used to do her sketches as a little girl. I laid out every document. I watched her face go through disbelief, then anger, then something harder and steadier that reminded me so much of myself. I almost cried right there. She didn't need me to fight this battle for her. She just needed the truth. Once she had it, she called an emergency board meeting herself. She walked into that room and, in front of Trent and his lawyer, laid out the manufacturing kickbacks line by line, contract by contract. Trent tried to spin it. Whitfield tried to talk over her. And that's when I finally spoke, the first and only time in the whole affair, and reminded the room, calmly, that no restructuring agreement Trent had drafted was worth the paper it was printed on without my written consent. Consent he would never, ever get. Trent was gone within the month, forced out under threat of a fraud lawsuit that would have ended far worse for him than a quiet resignation. His brother's manufacturing contract was terminated, and the money recovered through settlement. My daughter rebuilt her leadership team from the ground up, and this time she asked me to sit on the board, not quietly in the background, but with my name on the door right next to hers. People love to underestimate the quiet father in the corner, the one who doesn't say much, who just writes the check and steps back. They think that means he isn't paying attention. They think it means he won't notice when someone tries to take what he built for his child. He notices. He always notices. If this story meant something to you, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel because there are more stories just like it. Fathers who stayed quiet until it mattered and made sure it mattered when it counted.